Ayan, so Lizette, so ayan, so 'di ba parang kapanapanabik yung mismong araw na 'to, na parang nag-i-start na talaga yung mismong webinar natin.
Yes, Kuya Miko. And this is our first ever webinar. Ulitin lang natin. And I would also like to thank our guest speakers then for bearing with us kahit na ilang beses na postpone yung webinar na to. And finally, it's happening. Kaya thank you so much po sa ating mga guest speakers. At for sure ay marami silang ibabahagi sa atin today. So sa lahat po ng mga nanonood ay marami po kayong matututunan.
Yes, so let's move forward. So now that we are all geared up for today's webinar, we will turn the time over to our session proper.
For our first speaker, he is a part-time PUP instructor under the Department of Biology, teaching plant biology courses like General Botany. He is also a senior science research specialist at UP Philippine Genome Center under the DOST Career Incentives Program. He is also an alumnus of the PUP Bachelor of Science in Biology program and took his master's degree in botany at UP Los Baños, specializing rice growth and yield responses in flood tolerance under partial and complete submergence. Ladies and gentlemen, let us all welcome Mr. Enrykie Fortajada.
Good morning. Thank you for that introduction.
Hello sir, good morning po.
Good morning, Nico and Lizette.
Ayan, so hello sir.
Okay.
So kamusta naman po kayo ngayong araw po?
Okay naman, maaga nagising for this webinar.
Paano po kayo nag-prepare, sir, for this webinar?
Well, nag-backread some of my mga related literature na ginamit for my thesis. And nag-crop ng pictures from internet and other sources.
Okay po, sir. Very excited.
And para makam up sa PPT. So let me share. Okay na ba? Let me just share my PowerPoint presentation.
Okay po, sir.
Go ahead sir, good luck po.
Good luck po, sir, and we are very excited kung ano po yung babahaging sa amin today.
Sana may matutuhan kayo sa akin. Okay. So can you see my screen now?
Yes po, sir.
Okay. So good morning. Thank you again for that introduction. So welcome to this webinar entitled We Rise as One, the Biology of Rice, Rice Farming and its Role in Philippine Society, Economy, and the Future. So the topic that was assigned to me was the session 1, which is the biology of rice. So nag-come up ako sa title na, ito yung naisip kong title for this talk, A Little Bit of Everything, Biology of Rice. Di ba? Kasi yung topic na na-assign sa akin is comprised of different fields such as yung morphology, anatomy, physiology, and genetics, etc. Which ito yung mga fields under biology. And di ba pag sa buffet, hindi tayo kumakain ng madaming rice. So we select and we taste the different types of food. Kumuha tayo ng iba't ibang klase ng pagkain sa buffet para matikman natin lahat. So yun yung naisip ko dito sa talk you. Provide you a little taste of everything, kumbaga, sa myriads fields ng biology, such as morpho and ana, physiology, genetics, etc., in relation to rice. Okay, so we will talk about some mga basics about rice and about different fields under biology. So the topics included in I'm going to talk about the rice production and consumption worldwide in the Philippines and the different ecosystems or habitats of rice plants, the morphology and anatomy of rice, growth and development of rice, pollination and fertilization of rice. I'm going to talk also about the taxonomy, geographic origin, and the genetic diversity of rice. The responses of rice when they face or experience abiotic stresses or mga environmental different environmental conditions such as drought stress, salinity, high salinity, and flooding stress. I'm also going to talk about the physical and cooking properties of rice, the nutrition that we get from rice, and some rice farming and management. So, rice production in the Philippines is an important aspect for our economy. And hindi lang sa economy, but also in order to supply food for more than 110 million Filipinos in the country. So according to the new statistics, the Philippines ranks 8th in the world as rice producer, accounting for 2.8% of global rice production. However, and very sadly, although we are top rice producer, we are also considered as the world's largest rice importer. So parang it seems that the rice that we are producing in the country is not enough and we still need to import more rice from other countries. And siguro dahil dun sa dahil siguro malakas tayong kumain, ng mga Pilipino, mahilig tayo sa rice. And rice is considered as a staple food for Filipinos. It is one of our commodities. And this is also the reason why nasa top 10 din tayo as rice consumers. So we rank at 6th place as rice consumers around the globe. So the major rice producing parts of the country are in Central Luzon, the Western Visayas, Cagayan Valley, which was devastated by the recent typhoon, the Ilocos region, the newly founded region, which is comprised of North and South Cotabato, Sarangani, and Sultan Kudarat provinces, and lastly, the Bicol region. And in the Philippines, almost 70% of the total rice area is irrigated. And the remaining 30%, the rice field has irrigated facilities. So there is a continuous water supply to the field, whether through gravity, power, or pump, etc. So for irrigated condition, there is an ample or while in rain-fed naman is another rice environment that is found on elevated land, is solely dependent upon the rainfall for its water supply. So walang irrigation for this rain-fed, and the rain-fed environment solely solely rely on the rainfall. Okay. And much of irrigated rice is grown in the Central Luzon, while rain-fed rice is found in Cagayan Valley, Ilocos, and Iloilo province, and on the coastal plains of the Visayas. So, yun nga, pinag-usapan natin yung different rice environments. So, these are the different rice environments kung saan nag-thrive yung rice crops. So, we have irrigated, yun nga nasabi ko kanina, it has assured water supply. There is a continuous water supply for this kind of environment for rice. And usually, the rice is grown in banded fields with ensured irrigation or water supply. So ito yung banded fields, sample of banded fields. Banded fields are field channels constructed to control the flow of water to and from the rice field. Okay? So sa Tagalog, tinatawag siyang pilapil. So kinokontrol niya yung flow ng water inside and papunta and papasok sa rice field. And farmers generally try to maintain up to 10 centimeter of water level on the field. And the irrigated ecosystem has a yield of 5,000 tons per hectare. Okay. And the 75% of the world's rice production is from irrigated environment. So next is rain-fed, which can be divided into lowland and upland. So for rain-fed lowland, rice grown in this environment are flooded with rainwater with water depths that exceed 100 centimeters for no more than 10 days. So under rain-fed condition, rain-fed environment, rice can experience multiple abiotic stresses and high uncertainty in the timing, duration, and intensity of rainfall. So the rice under or grown in rain-fed lowland can experience submergence stress or flooding stress and drought stress, therefore prone to different abiotic stresses. This is because this is caused by the unpredictability of rainfall often results in field conditions that are too dry or too wet for the rice. Okay. So for this environment, nagkakaroon tayo ng yield or this it produces yield of less than 2 tons per hectare. Konti lang compared sa irrigated environment. We also have upland rain-fed. So in this condition, in this environment, it is usually located along elevated lands, along rivers or between hills or hillsides, etc. And compared with irrigated environments, sa rain-fed upland, no irrigations, and they usually the rice are planted usually in non-banded fields. So wala silang ganto banded fields. So it produces also a low yield of 1 ton per hectare. Lastly is deep water. So under this environment, it is a flood-prone environment with uncontrolled flood from transient flash flood or yung mabilisang pagbaha to longer-term flood up to 4 meters depth, which lasts for more than 5 months. Okay. So although this condition is very detrimental to rice crops, some rice varieties can still tolerate and can thrive under this flood condition. And mostly, itong mga rice varieties na to are mga deep water rice tinatawag. So yung mga rice varieties that can thrive in deep water condition, they are called deep water rice or floating rice. They are found mostly in other countries like Vietnam, Thailand, etc. Mostly in Southeast Asia, which mga bansa na madalas ding bahain. And it produces only 1.5 ton per hectare. Right. So let's now talk about the morphology and anatomy of rice. So rice is a monocarpic plant. So monocarpic meaning it flowers and it forms seeds, and then it flowers once, form seeds, then die. Kaya siya tinawag na monocarpic plant. They are cultivated rice plant. The cultivated rice plant is an annual grass with round, hollow, and jointed stem. Yung stem, sometimes they are called as culm. They have flat leaves and the terminal inflorescence or flower called panicle. One distinct feature of rice is the production of tiller. So rice produces tiller, an individual shoot. Okay. So in botany, when we say shoot, it refers to the collective term. It is a collective term for the different plant organs found above the soil surface. Shoot. Okay. And each tiller has their own roots, stem, and leaves. And tillers may or may not produce panicles. So plants also have their own root system. So their root systems consist of two major types: the crown roots, which is a fibrous root system, and the nodal roots. The crown roots develop from the node below the soil surface, while the nodal roots produce from the nodes above the soil surface. Next is stem or culm. So another name for the stem of rice and some grasses is culm, which consists of several nodes spaced apart by internode. So pagka kinapa mo yung stem ng rice, mayroon kang makakapang matigas na part, which is the node, and between the two nodes is hollowed part na siya, which is called the internode. So the first leaves are generated at the first node, and the leaf sheath of the leaf, so yung leaf ng rice, meron siyang two parts, the leaf sheath and the leaf blade. The leaf sheath is encloses or naka-wrap around siya sa stem ng rice, protecting the young shoots. And the primary tillers emerge at the primary tillers. The first tiller from the main stem emerge alternatively from the main stem. Okay? It project in upward direction. And a secondary tiller will produce from the primary tiller and will develop fewer leaves compared to the primary tiller and the main stem. So during the tiller formation or pag-produce ng tillers or the tillering na stage na tinatawag, nagde-develop ng madaming tillers. So at the first stage, ma-identify mo pa kung ano yung main stem, but in the later stage of the tillering, hindi mo na makita kung alin yung main stem kasi madaming na tillers na napoproduce. So for the leaves, they are arranged alternatively in the main stem. Sabi ko kanina, it consists of the leaf sheath and the leaf blade. So yung leaf sheath is elongated, cylindrical structure that encloses and protect the younger shoots inside the stem. Okay. And the leaf blade is flat. Ito, leaf blade. It is elongated, and it refers to the leafy part of the leaf kasi siya yung nagpe-perform most of the photosynthesis in the plants. So rice can also be distinguished from other grasses na halos kamukha lang din ng rice because for having ligule and auricle. So ito yung mga kamukhang grasses ng rice: the barnyard grass, the rice flat sedge, and the goose grass. So sa rice, they have this papery scale na tinatawag na ligule, papery scale, para siyang papel, and this is found inside the blade. It is attached at the base of the leaf blade. Meron ding auricle yung rice compared with other grasses. Walang auricle yung other grasses. And the auricle is auricle is a pair of hairy sickle-shaped appendages located in the leaf sheath of rice. Sickle shape, para siyang yung shape na carrot. Okay. So for the inflorescence or the flower of the rice, it has a terminal panicle with a single flowered spikelet. Yung spikelet, So the spikelet is consists of two short sterile lemma and a fertile lemma and palea. So the lemma is a little bit bigger compared to palea. Okay. Normally, the panicle formation occurs at the tip of the growing point of the shoot. The spikelet, the spikelet contains the sexual organs, the male and female part of the plant. So when the female, so the fertile palea and lemma encloses the sexual organs, the stamens, which is the male sexual organ of the plant, and the pistil, which is the female part of the plant, okay, which is found at the center. So ito yung stamen, this is your pistil. Okay. So the stamen is consist of anthers. Ano yan? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 anthers born in the slender filament. While the pistil is consist of ovary, which encloses the ovule, style, and the stigma. So the stigma is the parang landing pad ng pollen grains. And the pollen grains are found in the anthers. One important structure also in rice is the flag leaf. Importante siya because 50% or more than 50% of the assimilates or yung products ng photosynthesis is being transported or stored in the panicle. It is important in grain feeding. Next is the rice grain. So in botany, the fruit of rice is termed as caryopsis. It is a dry one-seeded fruit having its pericarp fused with seed coat. So the outer protective covering of grain is called the hull. The hull is consists of, meron din siyang ons, ito yung palea, and ito yung lemma. So para na-close na siya. And inside is the endosperm, which is covered by the aleurone layer and the pericarp. So the aleurone layer and the pericarp constitutes to the bran of the rice. And the embryo, which is known as the cereal germ. So sa white rice, sa bigas natin, yung aleurone layer, the bran, the aleurone layer ni pericarp constituting to the bran is and the germ layer, which is the embryo, is already removed sa white rice. And most of the nutritions na makuha natin sa rice is nanggagaling from the embryo and from the bran. So later we will discuss that also. So this is the growth and development of rice. Most often the young seedlings is grown in nursery beds. So pinapalaki muna yung mga rice, pinapa-germinate, pinapalaki sa mga nursery beds before they are transplanted by hands in the fields. So pinapalaki muna silang for 2 to 3 weeks. So yung 2 to 3 weeks old seedlings will be transplanted by hand in the rice fields. Sometimes farmers perform direct seeding, or ibig sabihin they just broadcast seeds and they allow it to germinate and to grow. Kasi most of the times, kasi yung pagta-transplant, it is very laborious and costly. So yung mga farmers, they need to hire people in order for transplanting. And the growth of rice plant is divided into 3 phases: the vegetative, the reproductive stage, and the ripening stage. The vegetative phase, the reproductive phase, and the ripening phase. And these phases can be divided into 10 distinct stages from stage 0 to stage 9. So these growth stages are based on the data and characteristics of IR64, which is a modern high-yielding semi-dwarf variety. But it can also apply generally to other rice varieties. Okay. And just the differences are mainly in the length of the vegetative stage. So nagkakaiba lang sila at the vegetative phase. Okay. So for the for instance, for example, we have IR64 here, which matures for 110 days. It has a 45 days of vegetative phase, while for IR8, which is also a high-yielding semi-dwarf rice variety, matures in 130 days and spend 65 days during the vegetative phase. Okay. So just a trivia lang, yung IR8 was developed by Enrykie in the early 1960s and was released in the Philippines to fight the hunger or the famine during that time. And tinatawag siyang miracle rice, yung IR. Okay, so yung mga short duration varieties like IR64 have maximum tillering stage. Okay, sige. Okay. So yung mga short duration varieties, sometimes mostly they are short varieties, while for the long duration varieties, they are taller varieties. Yung height, we're talking about the height. Because most of the kasi nag-spend ng time, madaming time, yung long duration varieties in vegetative stage, which is during the stem elongation, nag-spend sila ng lag time. So in long duration varieties, there is so-called lag vegetative period during which maximum tillering occurs, and they spend more time during stem elongation. While for the short duration varieties, meron lang sila for a maximum of 45 days during vegetative stage or vegetative phase. Okay, so let's talk about the different stages in the growth and development of rice. So the stage 1 is the germination to emergence. So in this stage, the radicle or the young root and the plumule, which is the young shoot, already protrude through the hive. So ito na itsura niya. And on the second or the third day after seeding, the coleoptile started now to emerge. The coleoptile is just a sheath found in grasses and in some monocots that protects the young shoot. Stage 1, seedling stage. The seminal roots, which are the roots that develop from the radicle, started to develop, and at the latter stage ng seedling stage, mapapalitan na tong seminal roots and the radicle by the permanent fibrous root system ng rice. And also during this stage, leaves continue to develop at the rate of 1 every 3 to 4 days, and they develop up to 5 leaves in this stage. Stage 2 is tillering. It's called tillering. So tillering from the word tiller, so the production of tillers. This stage extends from the appearance of the first tiller until the maximum tiller number is reached. This seedling shows the main culm or the main stem and the primary tiller. So ito pala yung itsura at the first few days ng tillering stage. Kasi ma-identify mo pa kung ano yung main stem. Unlike when they reach the latter part, the maximum tillering number, hindi mo na makikita, ganito na itsura niya. And you cannot identify anymore which one is the main culm, which is the primary tiller or the secondary tiller. So next is the stem elongation. This stage may begin before panicle initiation, or it may occur during the latter part of the tailoring stage. So there may be an overlap of stages 2 and 3, and the tailors continue to increase in number and height, and wala pang senescence na makakita o yung pag-turn yellow ng mga leaves in this part. Stage 4, which is the panicle initiation to booting. So as the panicle continues to develop, the spikelets become distinguishable. Ito na yung mga spikelets, nakikita niyo na. Young panicle increases in size, and its upward extension inside the flag leaf sheath causes the leaf sheath to bulge. So itong pag-bulge ng leaf sheath o pagbukol ng leaf sheath is natawag na booting. Okay. Next is stage 5, which is the heading. Heading is marked by the emergence of the panicle tip from the flag leaf sheath. The panicle continues to emerge until it partially or completely protrudes from the leaf sheath. Next is stage 6, the flowering, wherein the spikelet opens and the anthers protrude. Ayan, ayun mga white na yan. The anthers protrude because the stamen elongates and the pollen is being shed. So dito nangyayari yung pollinations in rice during this stage. The pollen falls on the pistil, thereby fertilizing the egg. Flowering occurs a day after heading. So dito nangyayari yung pollination. So later on, we will discuss that more in depth. So last growth phase is the ripening growth phase. So it consists of stage 7, 8, and 9, which mainly focuses on the maturation of the grain. So for stage 7, the grain begins to fill with milky material. So if kumuha ka ng sample niyan, pagka press mo siya, malambot pa siya, and it will release a white and milky liquid. And the spikelets or yung hull na ay color green pa din for stage 7. And the senescence at the base of the tiller is progressing, but the leaf sheet, the flag leaf, and some 2 to 3 leaves near the flag leaf is still color green. Next is dough grain stage. The milky portion of the grain turns into soft dough and later into hard dough. So the grains in the panicle begin to change from green to yellow. And lastly, the mature grain stage. The individual grain is mature, they are fully developed, hard, and they turn yellow. And dead leaves started to accumulate at the base of the rice. Okay. So ito nangyayari during pollination. So Oryza sativa is basically a self-pollinated crop, and the process of anthesis or yung opening ng spikelet or opening ng anther is greatly affected by the weather conditions. So the spikelets generally open at sunny days between 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. with the maximum blooming or opening that occurs between 10 to 11 a.m. Okay. Okay. So the maturation of the pollen grains in anther is So yung pollination, the maturation of the pollen grains in the anther is synchronous with the maturation of the ovule in the ovary of the same spikelet. Okay. So at the time of anthesis, the lemma and the palea will open, will get separated, and the filaments will all elongate, will protrude outside, and the anthers will dehiscence or will open, releasing the pollen grain. Immediately after the spikelet opens at flowering, pollen is shed on the protruded stigma of the same spikelet or neighboring spikelets of the same plant, thus causing self-pollination. So yung na-release na pollen grains will reach the stigma of the same spikelet or to the other spikelets or the neighboring spikelets of the same plant, thereby causing self-pollination. By nature, ito talaga yung parang destiny ng rice, because yung anthesis is only or yung production ng pollen grain is very viable lang siya only for 3 to 5 minutes. So now wala na siya ng ability to fertilize na ovules or ng pistil after 5 minutes. Pero yung stigma will still receptive or ready to mate for 2 to 3 days from the day of opening. So under tropical conditions, all the spikelets and the panicle complete flowering within 7 to 10 days, and following fertilization, the ovary starts developing into caryopsis. So after the fertilization, mag-close na yung lemma and the palea. So nakalabas yung, mas-stack up yung filaments and the anthers, and eventually they will degrade. Mawawala na sila. And ito na magiging itsura niya pag nagsara during fertilization. So all wild and cultivated rice species can also be being pollinated, with few varieties having scented flowers that attract bees. However, yung rice pollen niya is very short-lived lang. Within 5 minutes lang siya nag-stay as viable. And most of these pollen grains nga stay viable only after 5 minutes in a typical environmental conditions, promoting self-pollination. So let's now talk about the taxonomy of rice. Rice belongs to the genus Oryza, and it belongs to the family Poaceae or grass family. The genus Oryza contains 25 recognized species, of which 23 are wild species. They can be found in the wild, and two species are cultivated, the Oryza sativa and the Oryza glaberrima. Oryza sativa is grown worldwide except for Antarctica, while Oryza glaberrima is grown only in Africa. And there are actually 3 major subspecies of rice: the Indica, Japonica, and the Javanica. Okay, so the Indica is a long grain, non-sticky rice. Japonica has a more round yung grain niya, and it is more sticky compared to Indica. And yung Javanica, which is just a tropical type of Japonica, it is a large grain, intermediate rice. So hindi siya sticky, nasa gitna siya between non-sticky and sticky rice. And Japonica is mainly cultivated and consumed in the temperate region in Japonica, while Indica rice varieties are grown and cultivated in tropical regions. Okay. So the genetic affinity between these three subspecies are studied from chromosome pairing behavior and revealed that the Indica and Japonica has this compatibility. So hindi sila compatible to make Indica and Japonica. But compared to Indica and Javanica can be paired and Javanica and Japonica also can be paired. While Indica and Japonica is mababa yung compatibility nila. Okay. So they are not meant to each other, but for Indica, they could be paired with Javanica and Javanica to Japonica. Okay. So the genus Oryza sativa contains 25 recognized species. Okay, that can be classified into 5 complexes: the Sativa, officinalis, Meyeriana, Red Lea, and unclassified complex. Okay, so the basic chromosome number of Oryza is 12. Oryza sativa and Oryza glaberrima, and the 14 wild species are diploid with 24 chromosomes. Okay, so meron silang 2 pair of chromosomes, kaya naging 24. And the 9 wild species are tetraploids with 48 chromosomes. So 4 pairs of chromosomes, constituting to 48 chromosomes. Okay. And genome analysis done based on chromosome pairing behavior and degree of sexual compatibility has made possible to group them under 9 distinct genomes: A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, and J, and K. And based on the crossability and ease of gene transfer, the primary gene pool of rice is known to comprise the species sativa complex. So yung sativa complex can be considered as the primary gene pool. Primary gene pool. Meaning, the members of this gene pool or group are probably in the same species, and they can cross or pair with each other easily. Okay. While the species under officinalis complex is considered under secondary gene pool. And the members of this secondary gene pool are probably of different species, and they can be classified or closely related to the members. They are closely related to the members of the primary gene pool. So they can be paired, yung mga secondary gene pool, officinalis complex under secondary gene pool. They can be paired with sativa complex, but they will produce a weak or sterile hybrid. While the species belonging to Meyeriana and Ridley, as well as the unclassified complex, belong to the tertiary gene pool. So tertiary gene pool means that the members of this gene pool are distantly related to the members of the primary gene pool. So malayo silang kamag-anak ng mga sativa complex. And yung gene transfer between them, between the tertiary gene pool and the primary gene pool is impossible. So they cannot mate and they cannot be paired. Itong mga tertiary gene pool. So the origin of the 2 cultivated species of rice, the Oryza sativa and the Oryza glaberrima, have been identified using genetic diversity historical and archaeological evidences, as well as geographical distribution. So it is generally agreed that the Oryza sativa, that the origin of Oryza sativa is in Yangtze and Mekong rivers in Asia, while the Oryza glaberrima originated from Niger River in Africa. And they are believed to evolve independently from two different ancestors. For Oryza sativa, it came from, ang ancestor niya is Oryza nivara, while for Oryza glaberrima, the ancestor is Oryza barti. And the domestication of rice, of Asian rice, is considered to have occurred in 7000 BC. And it has spread and diversified to form three subspecies, the Indica, Japonica, and the Javanica. Remember that the first agricultural revolution, or yung time ng pag natuto yung the early humans to domesticate plants and animals, occur in 10,000 BC. So halos malapit siya sa domestication of Oryza sativa. Okay, so let's now talk about the different responses of rice under abiotic stress. So we'll focus first on flooding stress, which is a primary problem in rain-fed lowland areas, which in order for plants to survive this kind of stress, they need to have a tolerance mechanisms. Okay, so there are two types of mechanisms: the low oxygen quiescence syndrome, also known as quiescence strategy, and the low oxygen escape syndrome, which is known as escape strategy. So these two strategies occur in different types of flooding. So the quiescence strategy occur in complete submergence. So let's talk about the types of flood muna first. Okay. So the complete submergence is also known as flash flood. Kaya siyang flash flood kasi mabilisang flood lang. It occurs around 2 weeks. And then it recedes after that. While for deep water flood, it occurs for several months. And for this condition, those plants, those rice that do not possess tolerance under this kind of flooding will stay as is and it will not elongate. But for complete submergence, it is important to stay put and not elongate, because the flash floods, so the tolerant varieties of rice will conserve their energy and will not elongate, will not perform shoot elongation. And after the flash flood, after 2 weeks, the tolerant rice varieties, meron pa silang natitirang energy or conserve carbohydrates, and they will use this to produce more tillers. So they can parang mas mabilis sila makarecover after complete submergence. Unlike for those susceptible rice varieties or sensitive rice varieties, they will elongate during this during flash flood, and naubos na agad yung energy energy nila and conserve carbohydrates. And then after ng flash flood, pag nag-recedes na yung water, sobrang taas na nila and they cannot recover anymore kasi nagamit na nila yung reserved carbohydrates nila. So in Erie, they discovered the gene responsible for complete submergence tolerance, the called sub-1A gene, which confers submergence tolerance for rice varieties. And for escape strategy, so kailangan nilang ma-escape yung flooding condition which occurs for several months. So in order to survive, they need to elongate and masabayan yung pag-rise ng flood water. Okay. So in order for them to have an access to the atmosphere for gas exchange, so para meron silang carbon dioxide na ma-absorb and of course, they need light energy to perform photosynthesis. And the genes responsible for tolerance under deep water flood is the snorkel gene, the snorkel 1 and the snorkel 2 genes. Okay. So ano ba nangyari inside the plant? So during quiescence strategy, what happened is when plant tolerant rice varieties detect or experience submergence, ethylene, which is a plant hormone, will accumulate inside. So yung ethylene, para lang siyang gas na it should be released from the body of the plants. So pag nagkaroon ng submergence, hindi siya mahinder yung gas exchange. The ethylene will accumulate inside the rice plant, activating the sub-1A gene. Okay. Then yung the plant hormone kasi na responsible for shoot elongation is the gibberellic acid, okay, or gibberellin. So the accumulation of ethylene constitute to the more production of gibberellic acid. Okay. But the activation of sub-1A gene will inhibit or will stop the production of gibberellic acid, and the sub-1A gene will stabilize or will activate the proteins called slender rice 1 and slender rice 1 like 1 protein, promoting or inhibiting shoot elongation, and eventually they will conserve their reserved carbohydrate during complete submergence. While for deep water flooding, there will be also ethylene accumulation in the submerged parts of the plants, and it will activate the genes snorkel 1 and snorkel 2 genes, which will promote the accumulation of the production of gibberellic acid, promoting internode or shoot elongation. So let's now move to drought stress. Excuse me. So meron din pala rice varieties na develop ang Enrykie and was released in the Philippines called the Submarino 1. It is parang baby siya ng IR64 and another variety with sub-1 gene. So yung IR64 nga, di ba, ano siya, high yielding and semi-dwarf variety. So meron in introgression siya. IR64 have been introgressed with sub-1 or parang nilagyan ng sub-1 gene, and para magkaroon ng tolerance for complete submergence. Okay. So ginagawa ito through plant breeding. Okay. So although naging ano na siya, another plant variety, meron na siyang sub-1 gene and it can thrive under complete submergence. The same pa rin naman yung yield niya from IR64. So very advantageous lang siya in times of complete submergence or flooding stress. So next is drought stress. Drought stress is a serious threat to global rice production because it interferes the growth and the productivity of rice. So yung drought stress results in lower rice production by reducing cell growth, elongation, and expansion, and it also disrupts the plant's antioxidant function by promoting the production of reactive oxygen species or ROS na very harmful to organisms. So drought alters the morphological, physiological, biochemical, and the molecular aspects of rice. Okay, so let's talk about the morphological impact of drought stress in rice. So drought stress reduces the depth, distribution, the number, and the length of the root, as well as the length of the shoot of rice. So this reduction is due to the decrease in cell division, elongation, and expansion resulting from water shortage. So yung cell kasi ng plant is meron siyang tinatawag na vacuole. Para siyang, it is an organelle of inside the plants which store water. And itong vacuole na to, this organelle inside the plants, siya yung nagdi-dictate ng shape ng cell. So pagka magkaroon ng water shortage, mawawala ng water yung vacuole and mag-iiba yung shape ng cell. Eventually, what we are going to see outside is yung pag-roll ng leaves, yung pag-curl, and eventually mag-reveal siya ng yung dahon. It also reduces the leaf area, which is very important in the process of photosynthesis para maka-absorb ng higher amount of light energy. Okay, so water deficit also makes the leaves, okay, to roll. Okay, so these responses of rice to drought stress affects the photosynthesis, resulting to decreased sugar molecules production, consequently decreased plant biomass and crop yield. Next is physiological responses. So drought stress affects various physiological processes in the rice plant and thus alters growth and productivity in crops. One of the most important physiological responses to drought stress of plants is the osmotic adjustment. So osmotic adjustment is the process of regulating the water status of the plant cell by accumulating compatible solutes or osmolites. So those tolerant rice varieties will accumulate more compatible solutes, aiding for regulating water status in the plant cell. So osmotic adjustment helps maintain stomatal conductance, which is the opening of the stomata, an important factor in the process of photosynthesis. Kasi sa stomata pumapasok yung carbon dioxide, which is one of the ingredients in the process of photosynthesis in making food for the plants. Okay, it also helps maintain leaf water volume and growth in plants. So, kasi yung tendency ng plants when they are subjected to drought stress is to close their stomata para to retain water inside. So, para maiwasan yung water loss, kinuklose nila yung stomata. Pero ano din siya, parang downside din siya for the process of photosynthesis kasi hindi makakapasok yung carbon dioxide and inside the plants, maubos din yung carbon dioxide nandun na. And pag nag-close na yun, so may hinder na rin yung process ng photosynthesis. Okay. But for those tolerant rice varieties that subjected to drought stress, na-maintain nila yung opening ng stomata. So parang open siya a little bit para makapag-function ng photosynthesis yung rice, tolerant to drought stress. So the decrease in stomatal conductance, the opening of stomata, results to limited carbon dioxide concentration, which eventually results to the decline in photosynthesis and the reduction in growth and crop yield kasi wala mga produce na sugar molecules. Next is biochemical responses. So water deficit caused by drought conditions also alters various biochemical processes in rice. So under drought stress, redox homeostasis is altered. Redox homeostasis refers to the balance of generation and the elimination of reactive oxygen species. So, so the accumulation of the reactive oxygen species or too much production of ROS leads to the loss of redox homeostasis. And this condition is very stressful to plants. Okay. So, because harmful yung ROS kasi so the drought stress disrupts plants growth and function by promoting the accumulation of ROS. The ROS, the reactive oxygen species they are highly reactive chemical molecules that can cause irreversible damage to the DNA, to the lipid, to the proteins, the different biomolecules inside the plant. So ROS, or the reactive oxygen species, oxidize, they modify the different cellular components, preventing them from performing their functions. So the reactive oxygen species can damage different biomolecules, as I said. And in rice, the increase of ROS generation is managed by the production of antioxidants. So those tolerant rice varieties will produce more antioxidants. It could be enzymes or enzymatic antioxidants to counteract the production or the accumulation of the reactive oxygen species. So instead na i-oxidize ng ROS yung cellular components or other parts of the plants, it will oxidize the antioxidants. So the antioxidants will somehow scavenge and neutralize the excessive production of ROS. So parang the same mechanism lang sa human body, wherein meron tayong mga free radicals for sa katawan which can cause cellular aging or damage, and we intake antioxidants from fruits and vegetables to reduce the damaging effects of these free radicals inside our body. So drought induces a wide range of molecular responses in rice. So molecular studies on drought stress have identified the multiple changes in gene expression and led to the characterization of regulatory elements for plants to survive drought. So there are ABA independent pathway and ABA dependent pathway. ABA stands for abscisic acid, which is a plant hormone responsible for many development processes inside the plants, such as seed dormancy, and controlling the size of the plant organs, and the responsible for the closure of stomata. So studies on ABA-inducible genes in model plants show that several genes require protein biosynthesis for their induction of ABA, and there are complicated pathways that exist between the production of ABA and gene expression under drought stress. And I won't discuss the molecular responses in plants under drought stress in detail, kasi ang komplikado niya. What I just want to share is that there are various drought responsive genes in rice which regulate signaling pathways that activate various genes involved in decreasing oxidative injury, ionic balance in the cell, enhancing drought stress tolerant in crop plants. And in the Philippines, meron na develop ang IRI, and it was released na tinatawag na sahod ulan varieties. They are newly released drought tolerant varieties for rain-fed lowlands. So next abiotic stress, and lastly the salinity stress. So out of the various environmental factors, salinity is one of the most brutal abiotic stresses because most crops are sensitive to salt stress, including rice. High salinity in soil is one of the major environmental factors that limit growth and yield of wide variety of crops, including rice. So yung condition of soil characterized by high concentrations of soluble salt is called salinity. So in general, rice can tolerate a small amount of salinity, but um, but it greatly depends on the types of species of rice or varieties of rice at their growth stage. And sinasabi nila, it was reported that the tolerance level of indica is higher compared to japonica at seedling stage. So yung subspecies na indica can tolerate higher, can tolerate more the salinity stress while compared to japonica at seedling stage. And among the growth stages, the early seedling stage consisting of tillering and panicle initiation stage of rice are considered as most sensitive to salinity compared with other stages. So mas susceptible yung rice under if they are in early stage when they experience salinity stress. So according to ERI, the soil salinity beyond electrical conductivity of approximately 4 decisiemens per meter is considered as moderate salinity for rice. But if it is more than 8 decisiemens per meter, it is also already considered as stressful to rice. Okay, so the salinity in soil are being measured by the electrical conductivity, and the common unit that is being used for salinity is decisiemens per meter. And excess salt can cause osmotic stress, ionic stress, and oxidative stress. So ano nga ba ang mga ito? So for osmotic stress is a physiological dysfunction resulted from alteration of solute concentration around the cell. So yung immediate response ng plant seedlings is to high concentration of salt around the root is osmotic effect that reduces soil water potential or osmotic potential. As a result, plants cannot uptake water. So if rice plant is subjected to or experience high salinity, so madaming soluble salts around the roots of plants, the tendency is this soluble salt to move from higher concentration to lower concentration. So it will move from the outside of the roots to inside the plant cell. And pag nag-accumulate yung soluble salt inside, tendency of the water is to leak. Aalis siya sa cell and magkakaroon ng reduction in water potential or water concentration inside the plant. And salt-induced osmotic stress is also termed as physiological drought, which also led to the interruption of nutrient uptake. So kaya siya brutal yung salinity stress kasi the plant is also experiencing a physiological drought. So para din siyang under drought stress wherein limited lang yung water, hindi siya makapag-absorb ng water although madaming water. If it is under salinity stress, even water is enough, they cannot absorb water, and eventually they cannot also absorb nutrients that needed by the plants for different metabolic processes inside the body. So the osmotic stress disturbs the water balance and causes water loss from the cell that gradually reduces cell elongation, cell division, stomatal closure and leaf area, as well as photosynthesis and growth. same symptoms under drought stress. Next is ionic stress. So the presence of high concentration salt, the sodium chloride, around the root zone also reduces plant growth by ionic toxicity through the accumulation of these toxic ions, sodium ions, and chloride ions. And the accumulation of these toxic ions is resulted to the depletion of potassium ions and calcium ions needed by plants. So yung calcium and ions, potassium ions and calcium ions, they have a parang antagonistic effect with the toxic ions, sodium and chloride. So pag nag-increase yung sodium chloride inside the plant body, the amount of potassium and calcium ions will deplete. And it is important, itong ions na to ay important for different different metabolic processes such as the preserving of membrane potential, mga enzymatic activities, and it also maintains the cell turgor of the plant cell. Cell turgor ng plants, or the shape of the cell. So just like sa human body din, pagka nagkakaroon ka ng hypokalemia or the decrease of potassium concentration inside the body, usually dahil doon madami tayong salt sa katawan. And pagka hindi naagapan, it's very detrimental and detrimental to organisms pagka walang potassium. Next is oxidative stress. So salinity-induced ionic and osmotic stresses reduce rate of photosynthesis and consequently cause oxidative stress, which is the production of the reactive oxygen species. So exposure of plant to high salinity induces closure of stomata. So as the same symptoms under drought stress, magsasara yung stomata. So as a result, there will be a depletion of carbon dioxide inside the plants. So there will be a decrease in the carbon fixation during photosynthesis. So dahil walang carbon dioxide na i-fix yung rubisco, which is the protein that is responsible for fixing carbon dioxide in the process of photosynthesis. So instead of fixing carbon dioxide, rubisco will fix the other molecule, which is the oxygen. And the fixation of this of oxygen molecule will result to the accumulation or reproduction of reactive oxygen species. And the reactive oxygen species are very reactive in nature. They can interfere with plants' normal metabolism by causing damages to different biomolecules such as lipid, DNA, and proteins. However, plants try to detoxify reactive oxygen species by promoting their antioxidant defense system. So those tolerant rice varieties under salinity stress, they tend to produce more antioxidants inside their body to fight the harmful effect of the ROS. Resulting to the less damage to the biomolecules of these tolerant rice varieties, and of course, para ma-continue yung metabolic processes and growth and development and the production of more yield under this abiotic stress. So under high salinity, rice plants show various morphological, physiological, and biochemical symptoms that they even, and worse, they can die when the salt stress becomes very high. So among different physiological processes, photosynthesis is a vital physiological attribute related to plant growth and development that is affected by salinity. So the rate of photosynthesis decline under saline condition primarily due to osmotic stress that results in the closure of stomata and secondarily by higher accumulation of toxic ions, sodium and chloride ions that can damage the chloroplast. So yung chloroplast is the organelle responsible for the process of photosynthesis. And studies show that the accumulation of sodium ions interrupts the biosynthesis of the photosynthetic chlorophylls. So yung chlorophyll is the pigment responsible, the chlorophyll pigment is the pigment responsible for capturing light energy for the production of sugar molecules in the process of photosynthesis. So the influx of sodium ions also causes sclerosis, necrosis, and the premature senescence of adult leaves. O yung pagpaninilaw or pagka-wilt or the premature aging of adult leaves in rice. Thus, it limits the photosynthetic area available to support continued growth of salt-affected plants. Root and shoot length, root and shoot dry weight, and the total dry weight production also decreases with increasing the level of salinity. So under salt stress condition, growth reduction and water loss were higher in susceptible cultivars or sensitive cultivars compared with tolerant cultivars or rice varieties. Studies show that high salinity reduces the plant height and biomass by osmotic, ionic, and oxidative stresses. So under salt stress condition, growth reduction, such as the decreasing in root length, root dry weight, shoot length, and shoot dry weight were higher in susceptible cultivars compared to tolerant cultivars or rice varieties. Okay, so the salt-induced damages not only affect, so yung high salt concentration or the salt salinity stress damages not only does not only affect the vegetative growth but also the reproductive development or the yield of plant, in particular rice. So yield and grain quality of rice greatly influenced by salinity because salinity hampers the growth and development of rice, photosynthesis, and the production of sugar molecules needed for grain feeding or the production of yield. And studies show that salinity decreased grain yield by the reduction in the tiller number, pollen viability, fertility percentage, and 1,000 grain weight, where the level of yield reduction increased with increasing the level of salinity. So habang tumataas yung level of salinity, tumataas yung reduction to these parameters. Moreover, greater reduction for these parameters were observed in sensitive rice varieties than tolerant rice varieties. And researchers also noted that the grain quality of rice deteriorated by salinity through the reduction of protein and starch content of grain. So, nagkakaroon din ng reduction ng protein and starch content sa bigas, sa rice, sa rice grain caused by high salinity. It also reported that salinity decreased grain yield, biomass yield, and harvest index when salt stress was exposed at tillering and panicle initiation stage This is the vegetative growth phase. And yield reduction increased when the rice crop experience high level of salinity. So in Erie, they 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 developed or um, they develop rice varieties that are tolerant to salinity stress, and they have identified the gene responsible for this tolerance, which is called saltol. So the saltol gives the rice plant tolerance to salinity. And saltol is being used to help develop varieties that can cope with exposure to salt during the seedling and reproductive stages of the plant. So also sa recent studies ng IRI ngayon, they try to combine these genes, the SUB1 gene that confers tolerance to complete submergence, and the saltol gene that confers tolerance to high salinity. And they try to combine these genes in one variety to increase the rice plant tolerance to these different abiotic stresses, which is salinity and the submergence. Okay. So hindi lang importante yung yield sa rice production. Importante din yung quality ng rice grains. Because ito yung magdidictate ng presyo or marketable value ng rice. So yung mandate ng mga plant breeders, they will hindi lang sila magde-develop ng varieties that are tolerant to different abiotic stresses, but they also consider the quality of the rice grains, of the rice varieties that they are developing na suited or desired by farmers and consumers. So ito yung mga physical quality of rice grain: the length, width, uniformity, and weight. So there are three main classes of rice based on the length. We have the long, the medium, and the short. And people have different preferences for size and shape of grains. Some prefer yung mga long grains, while some prefer yung medium size rice grain. And another important aspect of length and width is the uniformity, okay, wherein all grains in one sample must look the same. Okay. So grain weight provides information about the size and density of the grains. Grains of different density, kaya parang mas gusto ng consumers na mas marketable yung grains, yung samples ng rice grains if they they are uniform in size, because this uniformity in sizes may affect the milling process, the cooking process, kasi since magkakaiba sila ng sizes, magkakaiba rin yung time nila ng cooking. And uniform grain weight is also important for consistent grain quality. So kailangan uniform yung sizes ng rice in a sample. Head rice yield. Next is the head rice yield. It is the weight of whole white rice grains remaining after milling. So it is a percentage over the total weight of the paddy or yung bigas. Or yung palay, I mean. Paddy, which means yung
yung palay na meron pang rice hull. Kasi yung chalky grains, okay, so yung breakage of grain during milling reduces the percentage of whole grain, and it can be due to a number of factors. So chalky grains, ito yung parang white part ng rice grain. So yung chalky grains are softer, and yung mga translucent, there are they're harder compared to the chalky grains. And itong mga chalky grains, they tend to break easily during kneading. So nagkakaroon ng breakage sa rice grains. And grains that are cracked are also likely to break during milling. So yung head rice yield is often the most important quality parameter sa mga millers since the head rice yield is generally linked to the payment they receive. So mas maganda yung shape ng rice grain, mas marketable siya. Next is color, which refers to the whiteness and translucence, which sinabi ko na kanina a while ago, the more opaque yung rice, mas madami siyang chalk or starch or amylose, which can lead to mas mabilis siya mabasag, ma-breakage compared to the translucent one. Chalk is the opaque area in the rice grain and is undesirable in almost every market. So chalky areas occur because of the malformed starch granules with air spaces between them. Chalky rice grains contain less amylose. So yung chalky part, it contains less amylose compared sa translucent. And yung amylose is just a soluble portion of starch. So yung chalky areas will cook differently from translucent areas or rice grains. But only parang very clever palate na could detect the differences. So halos wala rin naman sila pinagkaiba when they are cooked. However, visually, it is more appealing for the consumers yung gantong uri ng rice grains, yung more translucent. So last is the cracks. Most cracking occurs in the field, and it seems to be related to the changes in grain moisture or to the moisture cycles after the rice matures. So typically, the rice grains will mature during sunny days, and after kinagabihan, dahil mainit yung umaga, pagkagabi, mas humid naman siya and madaming juice na nagpo-produce or madaming hamog during the night. So itong hamog will moisten the rice grains, and eventually after 24 hours, this moisture will cause the crackings of the rice grains. So meron din iba't ibang factor na nagkakos ng cracking sa rice grain. May also result from the during the storage of yung harvested na palay. They could be harvested and stored in a moist environment. So na-absorb yun ng rice ng palay, and it will cause crackings. It will cause cracks. And cracking, they are, yung may mga cracks ito na rice grains, they are visually undesirable. So mas gusto ng consumers yung buo yung butil ng bigas. And the cracking also decreases the cooking quality of the grain. Kaya mas gusto rin ng consumers yung buo. Next is the cooking and eating characteristics of rice. So rice contain amylose. amylose content strongly influence the cooking and eating characteristics of rice. So those rice with high amylose tends to cook firm and dry, whereas um, yung rice with a low amylose content is generally quite soft and sticky. So mas mataas yung amylose content, mas dry and mas buwagal siya compare sa rice variety with low amylose content. So yung rice varieties with low amylose content, those are the sticky rice. And yung mga Japonica, subspecies ng rice sativa, tends to have low amylose, yung mga Japonica. So meaning mas sticky sila compared to the tropical Japonica, which is the Javanica. Yung Javanica is an intermediate, nasa gitna lang siya, or sometimes high or high. While the Indica subspecies of rice fall into all the amylose category. So mga indica can have a high to low amount of amylose content depending on the rice varieties. Next is the gelatinization temperature, which is the temperature at which the starch in rice begin the process of cooking. So at this point, the starch granules take in water and they lose their crystalline nature, para silang yung translucent nature nila, and the change is irreversible. So mag-undergo sila ng gelatinization, nag-absorb ng water, then mawalan yung crystalline nature nila and magiging malambot na kanin na sila. And the rice will they can, after cooling, they undergo retrogradation, or yung retrogradation is the phenomenon wherein the amylose which is responsible for the rice, the amylose which is responsible for the hardening of the rice in cooling. So nagkakaroon ng retrogradation. So para siyang tumitigas, yung matigas na rice. Okay. Yun yung process ng retrogradation. Next is viscosity. So it is the slower viscosity was affected by the kernel chalkiness in rice. So the chalky grains showed lower viscosity than translucent grains. Chalky rice grains contain less amylose, and the amylose is the relatively soluble portion of the starch, which provides the starchy texture when we eat rice. Next is the texture of cooked rice. It describes what we might experience in our mouth when eating rice. It could be could feel the hardness or the gumminess or the chewiness of the rice. Next is the flavor and aroma. So there are varieties of rice that are fragrant, such as yung jasmine rice. It is a long grain variety of fragrant rice, also known as aromatic rice, grown in Southeast Asia. So itong mga fragrant rice contains compounds that give the rice its flavor. However, the flavor in fragrant rice is the flavor in fragrant rice is produced by volatile compounds, and when they are cooked, they are just being released in the air, in the atmosphere during cooking. And this is what we can smell. We can smell the aroma of rice when they are being cooked. So here are some varieties of rice in the Philippines. So before we talk about, actually there are more than 300 rice varieties of rice in the Philippines. But let's talk about first the color of the rice that we know. So all you see, all rice in the market that you can see is milled to remove the inedible shell, the hull, and the grain called bran, as well as the germ or the embryo. So yung mga nabibili nyo sa market, ito na yung itsura na, yung white milled rice. They are polished because the bran and the germ, the cereal germ were removed. And most of the nutrients are usually stored they are usually found in the bran and the cereal germ. So what is left is the white part of rice or white rice, and they are packed with carbohydrates and proteins. So once cooked, white rice is usually soft and smooth. Compared with brown rice, when they are cooked, parang chewy, medyo magaspang yung texture niya, medyo chewy. Kasi yung brown rice, it is also called as whole grain kasi meron pa siyang part ng hull, which is the bran and the germ. And kaya siya, yung brown rice, brown rice is more nutritious compared sa white rice. The brown rice is also rich in fiber and magnesium, and it is quite a little bit trickier to cook brown rice compared to the white rice. We also have in the Philippines the heirloom rice na tinatawag. They are commonly found in heirloom rice are traditional rice grains in the mountain province or Cordillera regions. The heirloom rice comes in black, brown, yellow, purple, red, and even green that are usually processed similarly to brown rice to preserve much of the rice color and traditional properties. So, maintain nila yung color nila because they are not polished unlike the white rice. And yung mga heirloom rice, they are special rice and used by our indigenous people. And they were planted by mga ancestors pa nila sa Ifugao and other parts of other upland tribes in Cordillera region. Most of the heirloom rice are colored. They are glutinous rice, meaning malagkit, that possess outstanding quality, aroma. They have distinct texture, color, and taste, and they are definitely more nutritious compared to your brown and white rice. And most importantly, the heirloom rice varieties are grown in rice terraces. They are organically grown. So kaya nagkakaroon ng higher value yung mga heirloom rice for the local consumers as well as to foreign buyers kasi they are organically grown. Okay. Next is red rice. Red rice is rich in fiber, manganese, and zinc. It also boosts metabolism while having a lower glycemic index. So yung red rice, meron siyang low glycemic index. So yung glycemic index is just a ranking of food containing carbohydrates. So pag mataas yung glycemic index ng isang pagkain, isang food, it has higher amount of carbohydrates. So yung red rice, it has low amount of carbohydrate. Red rice is a variety of rice that is colored red because of its anthocyanin content. Anthocyanin is just it's just ano lang siya, para siyang antioxidants din. Antioxidants. It is usually eaten unhulled or partially hulled and has a red husk, which constitutes to the red colored um, ng red rice. Red color of this kind of, there's this specific rice variety, this type of rice. So they are, the red rice has also a nutty flavor compared to your polished rice. It has the highest nutritional value of rices eaten with the germ intact. So meron siyang germ and they are partially or unhulled. So mas nutritious siya compared sa other rice varieties. So, so the varieties of red rice include the Ulican in Kalinya and the Miniangan in Ifugao. Next is the black rice. Some violet or purple rice, when they have much darker, they have when the purple or violet rice has darker color, it also referred to as black rice. Okay. So yung black rice, kaya sila darker in color because they contain higher amount of anthocyanin content compared to the typical red rice. And parang pagka naluto kasi yung black rice, they have this fruity and parang chocolatey flavored that is perfect for making champurrado in black rice. So one example of black rice in Cordillera regions is the Balatinao and the Omineo found in Mountain Province. Okay. So ito rin yung some typical rice varieties in the Philippines. We have the Dinorado rice. It is the Philippine rice variety that is characterized by its natural fragrant aroma. They have Dinorado rice has white, long grain, smooth, shiny, and silky appearance. When cooked, it is sweet and has a fragrant aroma and slightly sticky with a chewy texture. Next is sinandoming rice. When cooked, sinandoming rice is the traditional favorite of every Filipino family. It has three types: the fancy, um, the special, and the regular type. So the fancy sinandoming rice is also called as laon, meaning old rice. So if
Hello, sir.
yes.
Sorry to butt in po, sir, but we don't have so much time po. But we will move forward to our Q&A part po para po matanong din po including po yung mga presentations niyo po, sir. Ayan po.
Okay, sige.
Ayun. Ayun, thank you so much, Sir Enrykie
Sorry.
Fortajada, for that mind-blowing information about biology of rice. It's okay, sir. No worries po. Ayun. So now, everyone, if this is your time to ask some questions or clarifications to our speaker, Sir Enrykie. So if you have any questions, please be sure to follow the format flash in the screen, which is use a number followed by your name and the question you ask. For example, Miko, number one, Miko, what is the powerhouse of the cell? I repeat, please follow the format B, before use a number followed by your name and the question. Example, 1, Miko, what is the powerhouse of the cell? Ayan. Ayan, sir. Ayan, so sir, so, ang dami po namin natutunan sa ano nyo, sa mismo talk po. Ayan, sobrang dami po talaga,
Very
promise.
informative po, sir.
Marami din ako hindi na natapos. Pero
Pero
pang
wala po
part-time rice,
tayong masyadong
rice
time, but
division.
pwede po
Okay
siguro
lang,
akong
okay lang.
sagutin. Thank you po, sir. So, habang nag-wait po tayo sa mga questions, ayan, so meron na question. Somebody asked, variety na tinatanim ng ating mga farmers. Ayun po.
Come again, what's the question?
Ayan po, sir. Bali, somebody asked from Rica May Valdez. So, ano po daw yung mga common variety?
Paputol-putol, hindi ko maintindihan yung question.
Ayan, so, sorry sir for the
Sorry.
technical difficulties. So, ang question po is from Rica May Valdez. So, ano po ba daw yung mga varieties na tinatanim ng ating local farmers?
Oh. Ano ba mga common varieties? Yung typical na rice varieties na in-include ko in the PowerPoint is yung mga dinarado rice, yung sinandoming rice. Mostly, ito yung mga varieties that are, wala akong specific na alam na name ng rice varieties. Pero, ang alam ko kasi, most of our varieties are rice varieties sa Philippines. Correct me if I'm wrong. Hindi sila masyado tolerant to different abiotic stresses. So merong mga varieties na although high yielding sila, pagka naka-experience sila ng harsh environmental conditions, they cannot survive. And yung ginagawa ng IRI is they introgress these tolerant genes to these different high-yielding varieties para magkaroon ng tolerance to different abiotic stresses. And parang yung nabanggit ko kanina, yung mga ibang varieties like sahod ulan and yun lang yung mga rice varieties na na-release pa lang na merong gantong uri ng tolerance to particular abiotic stresses. Sorry, pero wala talaga akong masyadong alam for
so much,
yung
sir.
anong varieties yung typically na pinaplant ng farmers natin. Sige, assignment ko yan.
Ayan po, sir. Thank you po.
Thank you po, sir.
So, may next question na po tayo.
For question
Ayan.
number 2 po, this
Ayan,
is
so,
from
Lizette?
Adrian. This is from Adrian. What are the ways to encourage students like us to pursue career in agriculture or in plant biology?
Sana na-entice kayo sa talk ko na kahit pa naging curious kayo sa field ng biology, lalo na sa crop physiology. Maganda talaga na napasukin yung field na yon, which is pag-aaral ng mga iba't ibang different stresses for different crops. And ano ba yung question? Ano yung
ano po yung ways to encourage students like us to pursue career in agriculture or in plant biology?
Siguro magkaroon kayo ng immersion sa mga farmers. Ma-experience niyo kung ano yung ano nangyayari sa rice fields nila. And siguro baka ma-inspire kayo na tulungan sila and to pursue the field in research such as crop physiology to develop more varieties that are magagamit ng farmers to produce more yield and eventually mas kikita sila.
Okay po, sir. Thank you po.
Ayan, sir. For the last question po, somebody asked from Rica May Valdez po. So, may mga studies or ideas po ba kayo na alam about sa rice growth and development strategies na ginagawa po or pinapropose po pa lang po dito sa Pilipinas?
Kung, please repeat the question.
Um, the question is may mga studies or ideas po ba kayo na alam about sa rice growth and development, which is yung ginagawa po or pinapropose pa lang dito sa Pilipinas?
Usually kasi yung mga rice growth, yung growth parameters and yield, typically mini-measure siya for during evaluation. So meron kang types, or meron kang specific, meron kang rice varieties, and then i-subject mo siya sa different environmental conditions, and i-measure mo yung growth, the growth parameters such as plant height, leaf area, and so on, and yung yield, if they can produce high yield, and they can perform better under particular abiotic stress. Yun, parang mas pipiliin mo siya for plant breeding. And importante yung mga plant parameters, growth parameters, and yield. Measure in evaluating crops under environmental conditions.
Okay po, sir.
Ayan, so thank you,
Thank
sir.
you so
Enrique
much
po.
po ulit, sir. Thank you so much po ulit, Sir Fortajada, for your time and all the knowledgeable learnings you have shared us today. No worries po, sir. Okay lang po. Maraming salamat po ulit. Thank you po, sir.
Ayan, so it looks like we have covered all of the questions.
Yes po, and we will move forward na
po.
po sa picture taking session with sir.
And yun po. So guys, please turn on your cameras because we will having a picture taking together with our speaker, Sir Enrykie Fortajada, which is we will treasure the most. Ayan po. Please open your mic, open your cameras po. And so 1, 2, 3, smile. Again, 1, 2, 3, smile. Ayan, so thank you so much po, Mr. Enrykie Fortajada, for that wonderful information about biology of rice po. So maraming salamat po.